Taoiseach, can you clarify what will happen in relation to the EU elections coming up in May if the withdrawal period is extended beyond the 29th of March? Will the UK hold European elections, and will that affect the number of seats available to MEPs here in Ireland? The second question is in relation to haulage. Companies using the UK as a destination or as a land bridge to Europe, what government assistance will be given to haulage companies to carry out their business? The Minister Humphreys makes some reference but doesn't clarify it there in her speech. The third question is in relation to farming. What farming supports will be available to farmers in relation to the difficulties they will have in relation to pricing in exporting, if there are tariffs applied, and in relation to the Common Agricultural Policy payments, the single farm payment, etc. And finally, in relation to funds that do flow from Europe in relation to funding for education, for Erasmus, for peace process initiatives that come through Europe, and also for Waterways Ireland, which is a north-south company. Thank you.
Questions there. First of all, whether or not the Article 50 gets extended, whether there's an application for an extension to Article 50 or not, is really a matter for the British Government and the British Parliament. I don't think it's up to us or anybody else to advise them on that. That is a democratic choice that they'll need to make. If there is an application made for an extension of Article 50, I and the Taoiseach have indicated that certainly Ireland wouldn't stand in the way as a problem to that. But of course, I think the EU would expect that if there is an application for an extension of Article 50, that application would need to have a plan to go with it. Rather than just buying more time, there would need to be time to actually get something done. And I think that wouldn't be an unreasonable request from the European Council, who would have to obviously agree to that request. In terms of impacting on the European elections, yes, if an extension was asked for and was granted and pushed beyond the European elections, well then there is of course the question for the United Kingdom of whether or not they are required to elect MEPs because they will be a European member state, and there are issues around whether or not a European Parliament can form without having representation from all member states in a way that's consistent with the treaties. And I think they are issues that the United Kingdom will have to think about and manage appropriately. I think, obviously it would be a strange thing to do to have European elections for a union that you're about to leave. And from our perspective, because the assumption was that Britain would have left the European Union by the time the European elections happen, the extra seats have been reallocated already. Ireland has benefited from 2 of those. And of course, those 2 seats could potentially be impacted on a temporary basis, perhaps, if British MEPs were to take their place for a short period of time during an extension period. But the way in which they would nominate or elect their representation in the European Parliament really is a matter for Britain, but obviously would need to be consistent with British and European law. In terms of, but I mean, I think it's an important issue, but in the bigger scheme of things, it's not the most important issue. I think we can put up with a bit of disruption in terms of representation in the European Parliament if there's a bigger priority to be solved here to ensure that we get to a point where we have a managed withdrawal agreement that can actually put in place all the things we want, like, for example, the protections for Ireland and its peace process, and a transition period for business and all the other things that we need to see there. In terms of road haulage, well, again, the European Commission was very helpful on this in December when they agreed to essentially roll over, on a temporary basis again only, the recognition of licensing as it applies today. In other words, that road haulage operators wouldn't need licences to go in and out of the UK, into the EU single market, that actually, as long as there's a reciprocal arrangement with the UK, which presumably there would be, we would allow for road hauliers to move back and forth and to use the UK as a land bridge where appropriate. In relation to farmers, I'm probably not going to get time to answer that properly. What I would say to you is,
you started so you can finish.
As a former Minister for Agriculture, believe me, I know, and Minister Creed knows, how sensitive the agricultural and the fishing industry is to a bad Brexit. And we need to protect and shelter this sector in a worst-case scenario, and we will. That won't be easy, it'll be challenging, but we will work with farming representative bodies and fishing representative bodies to work through what we need to do to plan in as complete a way as we can for all eventualities, and of course work with the Commission on that as well. Finally, positive news, confirmation that peace funding will continue up until the end of this funding cycle, and also will be prioritised in the next funding cycle post-2020, because the European Union wants to be very clear to people in Northern Ireland that they want to continue to support financially in a very real way the peace process and good community relations there.